Well, sorry for the slightly late start, everyone. But I think we will kick it off with public comment, and I believe we have one person for public comment. Is that person online?
Oh, and Hector Mercado,
Señora Nora Molina,
staff is
¿está usted
online
presente?
to help translate. So if you would like to start your public comment, Nora Molina, Hector is on the line to translate for you. So start when you're ready.
Buenas noches, señora Molina. Si usted está lista para empezar, yo voy a hacer la traducción a medida que usted hable. Por favor, hable con frases cortas para que pueda hacer la traducción simultánea. Puede empezar ahora.
Está bien, gracias.
Thank you, I'll start.
Buenas noches a todos. Mi nombre es Nora Molina.
Good evening to all. My name is Nora Molina.
Soy inquilino y miembro del equipo de inquilinos y
I am a tenant and member of the team of tenants at Serrano.
Estoy aquí para decirles que los problemas continúan en el Serranos y para pedirles que
I am here to tell you that the problems at the Serrano continue, and also to ask you to.
una vez más los destaqué públicamente. Le solicitamos que celebren una audiencia y le pedimos a HC que informe.
That we ask that Arlington Housing Corporation be asked to celebrate or to do a new meeting and report on the issues that we have at hand.
Sobre los que piensan hacer, sobre lo que piensan hacer con respecto a los problemas, también esperamos sobre.
También, we also ask that they tell us what they are going to do to solve the problems that we have.
¿Cómo va el plan del condado para una supervisión más cercana?
And also, what is the county doing to supervise more closely?
Enviamos una solicitud por escrito al señor Mark Ben, enumerar los desafíos que aún
we have sent a letter to one of the members indicating all the challenges we have right now.
enfrentamos, incluidos
¿Tiene algo más que decir, señora? Enfrentamos incluidos no es suficiente.
Ok. Con tres de cortes de agua, al menos 4 en los últimos 2 meses, que afecta a muchas familias.
We have suffered several water services failures, at least 3 on the last 2 months, and this affected a lot of families.
A menudo sin agua embotelladas ofrecidas durante periodos prolongados, incluso durante emergencias.
And the bottled water provided was not enough during that time or during the emergencies.
Ascensores que no funcionan en mi
Oh.
edificio.
Also elevators that do not work in my building.
Uno estuvo fuera de servicio durante un mes y el otro no.
One was out of service for around a month and the other one also.
Funcionó a veces, lo que causó verdaderas dificultades para los residentes mayores y
And this caused several problems for elderly and handicapped and also
discapacitados y las familias con niños.
and families with children.
En cortes de calefacción, incluido uno en un día muy frío, cuando la gerencia le dijo al condado que ofrecía calentadores portátiles.
There was also issues with the provision of heat, especially during the coldest day, and even management indicated that they were providing small heating units.
Pero a mí y a mis vecinos nunca nos dejaron que estaban disponibles.
But for me and some of my neighbors, they told us that they weren't available.
La gerencia parece esperar que viviremos con estos problemas si seguimos pagando el alquiler.
Management expect us to keep living in these conditions and keep paying the rent.
Completos sin descuentos por interrupciones prolongadas del servicio.
And they expect the rent complete, not giving any breaks or reductions for the issues they had at hand.
Necesitamos tú y su ayuda de nuevo. No estamos pidiendo mucho, solo el mismo nivel de vida decente que disfrutan otras familias en Arlington.
We are asking for your help again so we can receive the same treatment or the same status of living of other people in Arlington.
Gracias por escuchar.
Thank you for listening to me.
¿Puedo añadir otras cositas, por favor?
Could I say something else, please?
Yes.
Yeah, siga.
Como por ejemplo, el agua también ha estado saliendo muy amarillo frecuentemente, así los fines de semana. No sé por qué eso está pasando.
Also, the water came yellowish in color some weekends. She doesn't know why that's happening, but it happened several times. ¿Qué más?
Y otro problema, por ejemplo, de los elevadores que estaba pasando, por ejemplo, ha estado arruinado los dos al mismo tiempo. Uno, un mes, como le dije, y el otro después se arruinó, pero ellos no hicieron arreglar en un mes el otro elevador. Entonces, los dos ha estado pasando durante una semana entera, nos quedamos sin elevador.
And she wants to reiterate the issue with the elevator, indicating that one of them was broken for a month. They did not do any repairs while the other was working, but the second one broke and was broken for a week. So they were unable to use the elevators for at least a week, and they had to use the stairs. Muy bien, señora. ¿Algo más?
Y como por ejemplo yo vivo en el piso 8 y verían cómo cuesta cada vez que se arruinan los elevadores. Cuesta que uno suba al piso 8 o al 6 o el 7. Cuando uno hace compras, llega o vas y compras a lavar, todo eso cuesta.
And especially if you live on the 8th floor, carrying your groceries up and down the stairs, going to the laundry room, or just accessing the unit, it's a great burden.
Por ejemplo, también se está perdiendo, por ejemplo, cuando uno hace el orden de Amazon, así los pedidos se pierde cada vez. La oficina dijo que ya habían puesto cámaras a los elevadores, a donde llegan los paquetes y nada, no se ve las cámaras, se pierden los que llegan los paquetes y no hacen nada.
She also wants to indicate that there is a lot of boxes or items stolen, especially when the boxes are delivered. And management indicating they were putting cameras, but they don't see any cameras, and packages are still disappearing.
Y, por ejemplo, nosotros aquí no pagamos poco, pagamos un monto alto, entonces debería tratar de solucionar eso porque nos ha prometido, pero lo que vemos no cambia para nada.
Yeah. Also, what we pay in rent is not a small amount, and they should treat us better or provide more on that. That's what we ask of you. Muy bien, señora.
Eso sería. Muchísimas gracias. Le agradezco. Buenas noches.
That will be all. Thank you for listening to me. Good night.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Molina, for coming before us tonight and providing that information about the issues that you're facing at the Serrano, to update the rest of the commission on some recent events in the last day or so. Voice and some of the tenant advocates had sent an email or a letter to myself and the chair of the Tenant Landlord Commission yesterday, expressing concern about some ongoing issues at the Serrano, very similar to what was described tonight, and asking for information from the county about implementation of the CAF strategies, actions that the county had released last, I think, April, as well as the county's efforts to implement the recommendations in the Serrano report that the Housing Commission and the Tenant Landlord Commission passed in September. And so I was able to talk with Ann Venecia, the Housing Division Director, this morning, as well as Matt DiFranti, and also Marjorie Green from Voice. And we sort of came to the conclusion that it would be helpful to have kind of two meetings to address these topics in the next couple of months, trying to work around when Missing Middle is going to come before us, which it sounds like, Alex, is either going to be February or March. And considering that will probably dominate the entire meeting, that we wanted to schedule around that. And then Plan Langston Boulevard should come before us probably in April. So in line with some of the suggestions that Voice and the Serrano advocates had made, we're probably going to invite AHC as well as the tenants and advocates to come speak with us either February or March about some of the ongoing issues and efforts to resolve them, as well as hopefully AHC's redevelopment or rehabilitation plans for the property, So as people may remember, I think the 3-year extension of the loan sort of coincides with the 10-year requirement that they have to own the property for that long before they can apply for LIHTC credits to basically redevelop or rehab the property. And I know that AHC has been working with the county to figure out what that's going to look like for next year. So I think it'd be helpful to get a better sense of that. And I think a lot of the issues that were described tonight, as far as the water shut off, emergency maintenance, is happening because the building's just deteriorating, and that's not going to stop happening until there's a major redevelopment or rehab. So that's kind of one agenda item that I'd like to do. And then the second would be to invite county staff before us to provide an update on the implementation of the CAF strategies document, probably in May. So they're going to be releasing an annual report in April with information about how they've been working to implement their CAF strategies document, and hopefully the recommendations from our report as well. But since that's when Plan Langston Boulevard will come before us, and again, I would expect that to probably dominate discussion and all of our time during the April meeting, then we would be looking at May for having a discussion about the county's efforts to work on oversight, improved oversight of the CAF properties in general. So I also plan to reach out to HC to meet with their representatives to talk through some of the concerns that were raised. And also from my conversation with Ann Venetia, I believe staff is also planning to follow up and see if there's a more active role that they can play to mediate between residents and HC and the property management director and Bach to resolve some of these issues that appear to be ongoing. Yes, Eric.
Okay, so a couple thoughts real quick, because I know we need to move ahead with the agenda. Yeah, I mean, I think that sounds good. I think the staff update could probably be folded into a meeting, like that makes sense, that maybe the one that we're already having. It's a suggestion. It seems to me that having a meeting talking about these issues with the advocates and HC would probably be its own meeting. That's a whole meeting. Like that's a whole meeting, and maybe even more than one meeting. The other thought is, I'm glad you highlighted the water issues and the heating. That seems to be the most egregious. And I would prefer if we should talk about them in a systemic kind of way, but like, it's been really cold. Like there's been some really cold days, right? And people need heat, and that's an old building and they have issues, but like can the county look into that? I don't know, you don't know the answers to this, Colin, but can the county look into this? Like there needs to be heat in these units, and if there are water issues, and I think a lot of folks here are familiar with the issues with Serrano structurally. It's not a great building, but we need water. So can we do something now? I think these meetings are important, but like we can't wait on this stuff.
Yeah.
So
it sounds like part of the challenge is that HC has made some efforts to provide like bottled water when the water's out for like an entire day.
yeah.
But from what the tenants and advocates have said, that's basically on if you ask for it, it's not just provided. So it's if you call the office and say, I want bottled water, they'll say, oh, we have some available, but they're not broadcasting to all the tenants. Again, that's my impression from conversations and from what they provided in the letter. And Alex, can you send that or forward out the letter to the rest of the commission? Thank you. And I think with the heat as well, I think they were making some like space heaters available, but not to everyone. It was just like if you called to ask for it. And especially for low-income tenants or tenants, who their immigration status lends itself to not being super comfortable confronting authority, and they're the ones who end up suffering when things aren't sort of proactively provided. Yes.
I'm just trying to wrap my brain around this because didn't this happen in 2021? Didn't it start?
We
in
had a
2020?
whole bunch of meetings in 2021, but this has been an issue at that building for at least 5 years, and that would be being generous, probably much more, many years than that, yeah.
So are we at the point where we need to question, or the county needs to question whether this building is livable with all these problems? And if it's not, if they get someone out there and say, you know what, at this point, a whole renovation or just whatever they come up with, we need to relocate every tenant, because it was like tenants who had major issues, who wanted to leave, left, but now the tenants that are still there, now they coming back full circle, they have the major issues. I mean, it's like the whole building. Wouldn't it be more beneficial just to start from scratch with this building? Because it's just way too many, like, series, water and heat. That's serious.
I think, so my understanding is that like the water and the heat going out are in response to maintenance issues where they have to turn off like the heating units, they have to turn off the water, as opposed to like the water is just not there or working. And because they're responding, and my understanding too is that AHC and Director Falk has gotten a lot better at addressing the maintenance issues since the county had intervened, and since all those things had happened in like 2021. That, you know, the mice issues and a lot of the other things like the mold, I'm not hearing about that from the tenants or from the advocates at this point. So it does sound like a lot of progress has been made, but the continuing like deteriorating state of the building has led to a lot of these like shutoffs that have impacted, you know, the ability of the tenants to sort of function. And it sounds like AHC has been very uneven in how they communicate and sort of offer mitigation efforts around these things. So I think AHC is very much of the mindset of like this building needs to be either, you know, gutted and rehabbed or like torn down and rebuilt. But from a financing perspective, they can't start that until after they've owned it for 10 years, and that won't kick in until either next year or the year after, I think. So the plan is to do that in some form, and that's what I'd like to have AHC come and talk about that, and what are their steps to make it livable in the meantime. But yeah, I think it's more so like uneven access to some of the mitigation efforts that, you know, like the advocates have talked to them about. Can you provide bottled water? And AHC is like, oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, we should do that. And then they start providing bottled water only to people who ask for it, as opposed to like, let's proactively just have a bunch of cases in the lobby and anyone can come down and take them or something. And that seems to be pretty consistent for some reason with AHC, that you have this kind of uneven delivery of like, if you're thinking about the population that they're serving, they're not always thinking about the people who don't have the time and the resources to go and like demand things or, you know, get what they need. Like, how do they still account for those people? And the people who can't afford to go out and just buy bottled water on their own, too, things like that.
They have other properties though, right? Why can't they relocate the tenants of the properties and just, I don't know, maybe that's far-fetched.
Like
Or
a
just keeping the
240
building
unit
empty until they can
building,
do
right?
something.
Yeah,
Very
it's-
large building.
a very
It's
large
several
building.
Oh,
hundred.
it's
Very
large.
large.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's
And
two
it's-
buildings.
Yeah,
It's gonna be
sorry.
money,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They're collecting rent. So if they move, like, if there's no one in that building, they're not collecting rent. But this is shameful. Like, why this? It just, I remember those meetings in 2021. It was horrific. Like, we know in Arlington County, if any building is without water for, let's say, a day, residents would go wild and it would get done. It is horrendous that these people in Arlington County, one of the nicest places to live, one of the safest places to live, our residents are getting treated like this. This is, I'm just speechless of how, honestly, like, we let this company, like, manage any buildings in Arlington County. Like, it's just showing the huge disconnect of, if you're wealthy, you get stuff done. If you're poor, that, to me, that's what it's showing. Like, and this company just does not like, it's like,
I mean, I think like.
but they don't, like, they are letting these people, if they need water, come to us for a week, for a no heat, for a month, it's
Well, I don't think the
crazy.
water's been out for a week. I think that's
Yeah.
like a day. It'll be out.
But still, like, they're making these people come to them. These are like, this is their company. This is that these people, work to live at this place, to give their money, to make sure they have a roof over their head, and they're getting treated. I mean, I'm not gonna.
I don't
Support
disagree,
it.
and I don't disagree with you. Like, I agree with all that pretty much. I guess I would just say I do think that like if we're talking about HC, I think we really do need to acknowledge that like they have done a lot. Should they have been in that place in the first place? Like, absolutely not. Like, I think we do have to acknowledge that like they've made a lot of improvements, but clearly there's a huge trust deficit that remains at the very minimum, right? And that's being very generous, I think. And so I agree with you. I just, there's been a lot they've done. Like Helen was saying, we're not hearing about mold. We're not hearing about these huge systemic issues, but we are still hearing a lot of incidents, right? And we know that if we're hearing about 10 incidents, there's probably 100 going on because only about 10% or whatever probably ever makes it, right? And so I know Kellen has to move on with our agenda. I just, I want to chime in because I feel like there's a sense of urgency that kind of struck me, especially with the heating issues.
One last thing with that, I know you gotta move on. Why do they have to? Why can't that time frame be tweaked because of the issues that are going on? Why do they have to wait the 10-year? Why can't that, if we can't move it on that end, why can't we move it on this end?
Karen, do you have more?
I'm just saying money. It's a tax credit
It's-
rule.
it's-
They have to apply for
it's a-
tax credits. And that's a big, huge
I know it's
source
a
of
rule,
funding.
but rules can be changed, is what I'm saying.
It's
No,
a
it's
fed-
an IRS.
a federal,
Those
yeah.
can't, those are, yeah.
Oh, okay, rules over people comfort and home and lifestyle. Okay, whatever, let's go.
I just wanted to also lift up just the urgency. We have another 6 or 8 weeks. I appreciate that we're going to have some meetings with the management, but by the time those actually make it down to impacted people, I worry something serious could happen. We could all look back and say, damn, we all should have moved quicker, right? And so what's the short-term fix? I mean, do we ask HT to make sure they have a certain amount of heaters on demand? Do we ask the county to maybe provide some emergency funding? What's the short-term fix if the power goes out again for an extended period over the next 6 weeks?
I think it's a good point. And I think, county staff is definitely planning to reengage. Like Ann Venetia, she reached out to me, the same day that we got this email. And when we talked this morning, she said part of the reason why the county wasn't involved is because they haven't gotten any complaints to the county. So the county hasn't really been following it because residents at this Serrano haven't been reaching out to the county to say, here's this issue. There's, exactly why they haven't been reaching out to the county versus just trying to deal with it directly with AHC. I'm not sure. I know the other thing is that apparently the relationship between some of the advocacy groups and Drucker and Falk deteriorated a bit last year, and AHC had asked the advocates to stop interacting directly with the property management firm and just go to AHC corporate if they had concerns. And so there seems to be some communication issues and some other things, but my impression from Ann is that the county does plan to reengage and figure out what is the best role for the county to step in and start mediating. And I think, we saw back in 2021, there's a lot of power with that. When the county says, hey, this is a priority, we want to fix this, things happen. And so I think, Ann and her team are trying to figure out what's the best way to work with both the residents and AHC to resolve this, to make sure that, any of our CAF residents aren't dealing with these types of issues.
All right, I want to try to wrap this up. So this is what I propose, because I think we generally agree something should happen, long term with meetings, but also immediate. So I'm going to make a motion that that our chair send a letter on behalf of the commission to HC, copy our housing director, and copy Chair Dorsey, whoever you all think needs to be copied, And the letter basically says, we heard one person at our housing commission meeting. We have also heard throughout the community that there are issues, including those involving water and heat. That's not an exclusive list. And, can you please look into this immediately and follow up in, short order, basically. And my motion also says that I give deference to the chair to figure out kind of whatever else sounds reasonable to ask for. I think that will help our housing division also push things along if the housing commission itself has said we need something. So that's my motion.
I second that motion.
Okay. I don't have a list of all the commissioners in front of me, but Alex, can you help me out with the roll call? Thank you. Okay. So we'll start with, so this is voting to approve the motion that was just brought by Commissioner Berkey and seconded by Commissioner Rubalcava. Yep. And so Commissioner Berkey.
I vote yes.
Okay. Commissioner Blake, who I think is on the line.
Yes.
Commissioner Brown.
He's gonna be absent.
Okay. Commissioner Edwards.
She is not on yet.
Okay.
I don't.
Commissioner Heminger.
Yes, with just a brief comment. I just want to be as clear as I can that we need the county to move as urgently as possible. I have an obligation with the NAACP. Those buildings are almost all communities of color. If AHC and the county doesn't move quickly, then we are going to mobilize NAACP and we're going to cause a big ruckus. So whatever we can do on behalf of those residents, I think we have to do it, but resoundingly yes.
Okay. Commissioner Lee.
It's virtual if he is on, but I don't see.
Okay. Commissioner Macbeth, I vote yes. Commissioner McGilvray.
Yes.
Commissioner Montgomery.
Yes.
Commissioner Norris.
Yes.
Commissioner Rubalcava.
Yes.
And then Commissioner Surface.
Yes.
Okay. I did not miss anyone, right? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you. So yeah, I will work on that. Thank you, Eric. Okay, well, that takes care of public comment. Next, we have approval of the notes.
Sorry, when do you think that letter will go out? I know if you need help, I'm happy to help, but I don't know, I hate to say that people's lives are on the line, but it's been so cold and.
I can work on it tomorrow and hopefully get a draft out to the commission like this weekend, if that works for people. Yeah. Okay. Any edits to the minutes? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Do I have, we have a second. I don't think we need to, do we have to do roll call for every vote or can we just do like unanimous consent? For...
In person, you can raise hands.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. But then you'd have to go through the people individually up here.
Okay.
But yeah, you could do in the room A versus A and then go to, I think we have 3 on.
Okay. So I guess for all those in the room, raise your hand if you approve the minutes. All those not approving the minutes, please raise your hand. Okay. Any abstentions in there? Okay, so 1 abstention. And then for the folks online, I guess we have.
Nikki Blake.
Yes, I think that's Nikki
and Margaret.
Raising your hand. And then who's the other one?
Margaret.
Okay. Commissioner Miko. Okay, also raising her hand. Okay. So one abstention, and the rest in favor. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is information update about Crystal Houses.
So we have Chris DeMontis with the county here. So I'll give it over to him.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. There's a PowerPoint presentation that I believe is being pulled up. I'm going to kind of kick it off and give a little background for those who may need a refresher or are new on the Housing Commission or haven't heard about this in a little while, but there's been a lot going on in the background. So want to update everyone. And so I believe, Mitch, you're going to share
the
the screen.
person who controls the meeting, please allow me to share the screen. Is that possible to do?
Yes, it should be open for everyone.
Doesn't look like I'm able to. Oh, just kidding. Sorry, guys. Okay. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Perfect.
Great, thank you.
Take it away, Chris.
All right, let's start with the next slide, please. Excellent. So for way of background and context setting, this is Crystal Houses located in the Aurora Highlands neighborhood. Was acquired by Washington Housing Conservancy in the end of 2020 in a unique transaction that involved Amazon as well as JBG financing. An existing property of around 828 units and 2 towers, mid-rise towers, with significant surface parking and a pool that you can see there. Simultaneous to that acquisition, Amazon, an affiliate of Amazon, actually acquired the infill development rights via an option agreement. So this was an already entitled infill development that was entitled under a different market rate for-profit developer, and they acquired those rights for $40 million for option consideration. What then occurred was a unique real estate transaction with the county insofar as Amazon's affiliate assigned those development rights to the county via an assignment agreement with a whole slew of conditions, as you can imagine, everything from how the RFQ worked to a very aggressive development timeline for the affordable units. I should also mention that when they acquired the site, WHC put an overall covenant on the site for 75% of the units to become affordable units, to take those units affordable officially for 99 years. And so those covenants came through in the assignment agreement. So what was going to be market rate infill of roughly 800 units, it became 75% essentially affordable housing, which is really a very unique structure anywhere. So with the county's assignment agreement, went forward through a rigorous and long development selection process, and we'll show a slide that has some of the process on there just by way of background. And selected the 2 development partners that are on this Housing Commission, EYA and APA, who will be taking this through pre-development, development, delivery, and ownership in the next roughly 5 to 7 years. So next slide, please. So this is an illustrative of the site plan as it was entitled in December of 2019, a year before WHC acquired it, a number of infill buildings on what are essentially surface parking lots. And most of this will become affordable housing with a mixed income as well as some market rate on the property. Another unique aspect of this is during that the entitlement process, CH5, which is located right down there on 22nd Street, was actually agreed to be donated to the county for affordable housing as a way to, in exchange for the bonus density that was earned for the entitled infill. So that is actually in county ownership. It's currently a surface parking lot that's used by Restaurant Row on 23rd Street, and is slated for affordable housing, but we'll get into more of that detail later. Next slide, please. Thank you. And this is a little bit about the process. Started with a request for expressions of interest, which is really just to try to get a universe of potential developers. This was a national scale development advertisement. A number of groups responded to the RFQ, which was the next step in the process. We had 16 teams and 29 representing 29 unique developers from, as far away as, Illinois, Florida, New York, a number of different areas. Went through a rigorous selection process with an interdisciplinary team in the county that down selected to 7 teams for the RFP, which took place in 2022, of which 5 teams responded to the RFP. From there, started a negotiation process that was guided by procurement best practices at the county, negotiating with 3 different teams for what were essentially best and final offers with the richest development programs, meeting the most amount of goals for the county. And at the end of last year, negotiated a disposition and development agreement with the team that is here. So with that, I'll turn it over to, I believe EYA is next. So I turn it over to Jack. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good evening. Thank you, commissioners, for your time. My name is Jack Lester. I'm a partner at EYA, and I'm joined by my colleague, Karen Garfield, who's our head of multifamily development at EYA. Couple of things. We're super excited to be working on this project. We understand how important this is to the community, and we don't take that for granted. And we're really excited to be working again with APA and the county on this project. The other thing I'll say is when I saw the final form of presentation, I noticed there's 20 EYA slides and I think 4 or 5 APA slides. We don't have an outsized role here. We are led by our teammates at APA. We do have a lot of experience, but I'm mindful of your time. I'm going to go through them quickly. If I talk too fast, stop me. And if I miss something, we can ask at the end. So let's go there. So we're into our 31st year. We're a Bethesda-based 100-person company that develops infill development projects in the DMV. You'll see a little bit later, we have a deep history with mixed income and affordable housing, and we think we bring a really unique perspective to meeting those affordable needs. Let's go to the next slide. These are the 4 areas of capability and competence in our company. We work on all of our entitlements are challenging and complex. We, by the nature of the work and where we do it, that's the case. We do infill development. We were doing infill 30 years ago when people didn't know what the term infill meant. And so we were really a cutting edge in bringing people back into urban areas with the product. And when you go into neighborhoods like Old Town Alexandria or Capitol Hill, where they have 350 or 250-year histories, we've got to be sensitive to our surroundings. That's in our DNA. And that's what we've been really successful working with stakeholders. You see large-scale master planning, public-private partnerships like this one. And again, I mentioned, and we'll go into some detail about some of our mixed income developments that we've worked on. Next slide, please. Our core values, I'll just take a second: integrity, determination, excellence, innovation. We try to live these every day. We're so pleased to be partnered with APA, who, through our collaboration on a project in the district, we've learned, and I hope they have, that we share many of these same core values. This is a graphic representation of the developments, the communities that we've built. You're familiar with the Metro map and the so we've stayed infill and along transit. That's been a big part of our history, and I'm happy to talk about any of those projects. Maybe there are some there that you know. And I do have some individual slides. So we have experience in Virginia. Our experience in Arlington was in our very early days, but more recently in Virginia, more generally, we did the townhomes at the Mosaic District. And I guess one of the things, we were the first ones in there, and this isn't all of these points I'm making may not be relevant for the Crystal House, but the point here was before there was a Mosaic District and it was just a, kind of a concept that was moving forward, we were able to build a story and get folks to buy for sale housing there that really provides, and this is true in all neighborhoods, stability. Folks that are buying are looking at a much longer timeline, and so they are willing to come into communities that are evolving and developing, and that was the case there, and really kind of set the pace for Mosaic's success and continued success. I think Edens would tell you that. Next slide. Robinson Landing, this is an iconic project that we are just now completing. We've completed the construction within the last 3 months, and I think we have one more home to sell. Clearly, this is not affordable housing, but this was a really challenging entitlement, coming into Old Town, meeting the various historic requirements, very complex financing, super creative design. And I think the thing we're most proud of here is how we were able to and have been able to open up the Alexandria waterfront, which had really been closed off to the public for generations. The last project is in Virginia, I think, that I'm going to talk about. Two more. Reston Station. This is the example here. This is an ongoing project. Will be sold out here in the next 60 to 90 days. This was taking reusing office, an existing office building that became obsolete, and we were able to create with JBG a much more integrated and mixed use development at the Metro in Reston. In the last Virginia project is Graham Park. This is a missing middle development for this region. And here was an opportunity. Again, we worked with Federal Realty. They were shrinking the footprint of their shopping center. So again, a reuse, not of office like the earlier example, but a reuse of old and too much, in fact, retail, taking a surface parking lot and turning it into 177 for sale homes. I'm going to touch now on our mixed income experience. The next is a list of the projects or the folks that we've worked with. So in the center section, we've worked, and I'll share a couple of slides with ARHA, Alexandria Redevelopment Housing Authority. Karen will talk a little bit about our experiences and our relationship with the Housing Opportunities Commission in Montgomery County. We're now working on our second project with the DC Housing Authority, the redevelopment of Greenleaf Gardens. We were integral, and I'll talk a little bit about it, our project at Capitol Quarter. You can see some of the investment partners that we've had, as well as some of the nonprofits that we've worked with. Next slide. So I won't say much about this on the technical side, except to say, as I alluded to, this is an important part of who EYA is. We, the folks that come to work at EYA love the creativity that we bring, the kind of the coolness to some of our market rate projects, but they also come for this kind of mission element of what we do. And we think we bring something different than traditional affordable housing developers do. We have a keen eye for the market, and we'll see in some of the examples where we've not turned the model on its head, but we've made communities where and created value in the for sale or the market rate for sale portions of the project that can then leverage and be invested into the affordable portions of the project. So let's go to the next slide. Maybe I can give a better example. So here's a good example. This is a partnership, and Karen, jump in if I get it wrong, but I'm kind of rolling. So this was a project that we did with HOC. They owned 70 plus or minus obsolete garden apartments on this site that is near the new Purple Line in Montgomery County. And they reached out to us, and we were able to develop a plan that leveraged the value of the 62 market rate townhomes that we built. You see that in the upper right-hand corner. In the value that generated was the equity for HOC to invest, and we led the development of a 200-unit mixed income affordable building that they owned. So again, being really creative, getting a challenging entitlement, getting this appropriate density in this location, creating the value in their land, and then turning that land value into capital to invest in additional affordable homes. Next slide. Chatham Square, this was really the start of our entry into mixed income housing. This was kind of groundbreaking in how we approached mixed income housing. The thing that's here, and you'll see it on another slide, is you can't tell the affordable homes, and this is a public housing affordable, from the market rate homes. So we sold, and I don't know the prices at the time, this is probably going back 15 to 16 years, but homes that sell for 1.5 million next to public housing apartments. And so that's how we were able to create that value that then the housing authority can leverage into even more and better affordable housing. Next slide. This was our second development, very complex, with our very complex, challenging entitlements. Same thing. It's nearly impossible for the untrained eye to identify the $1 million townhomes from those serving public housing residents. And again, leveraging that land value and creating more and better housing for the community. And next one. Karen, I'm going to ask you to jump in. This is an HOC, but you could talk a little bit about what we're doing at HOC with on West Side.
Sure. So West Side Shady Grove is at the Shady Grove Metro. It was actually EYA led a master planning effort with Montgomery County and developed 400 townhomes. And then there are 3 multifamily buildings. The one on the upper right in that site plan is the Daily, which is was 30% affordable. The next building is the Laureate, which we are partners with HOC, Housing Opportunities Commission of Montgomery County, and that is 30% affordable, 25% MPDUs, and 5% workforce. And then there's a third multifamily building, which we are in the nascent stages of getting that ready for construction. The Laureate will deliver actually in April of this year, so we're extremely excited about that. But I think it's a great example of a truly mixed income project that the photo on the rendering on the upper left is it's a really beautiful building.
And that goes for the one at Chevy Chase Lake as well, the Lindley. I mean, spectacular. The units are you cannot discern market rate from affordable. Here is the last project that we'll talk about with mixed income. Any of you who've been down to the Navy Yard, maybe gone to a Nats game, might know the townhomes there. This was a project we did with the Housing Authority in the District of Columbia, approximately 330 homes. There were a third of them were public housing affordable, approximately a third workforce, and then the other third market rate. And again, being able to create a community where you can get the full value for that market rate, so you can subsidize the workforce and support the affordable housing. And we came up with some really cool architectural designs. I'll just take 1 second on it because this is the way, and I won't take credit for it because I'm not that creative, but this is the kind of creativity we apply to difficult challenges. So here we have a community of row homes. In fact, if you were to look at the 3 row homes, what you would find is multiple flats in those. So from the exterior, they're indistinguishable, but we're able to provide more housing for more families in this mixed income community with creative design. And I think the last slide, Karen, is really just about our multifamily expertise in our pipeline. I'll take a second on it, but we have, it's an important part of what we do. People know us mostly for our town-owned communities because, you know, the apartments can seem like a commodity, but we have got a really robust pipeline, and much of it is what we would call kind of impact housing that that has a substantial amount of affordable housing in it. So that is it, and thank you for everyone indulging me.
And I'm going to take it from here, Jack. You're a tough act to follow, but the folks at the Housing Commission know APA pretty well, so that's why we tried to keep our slides to a smaller number. But first and foremost, Carmen Romero, I'm the CEO at APA. I've been at APA for 12 years, but only in this role for about 1.5 years now. And relevant to this conversation, I'm also a 25-year resident of Arlington County. So I get the privilege of living and working in this incredible community. And this is a special opportunity for us to be selected by the county to work with a developer that we admire so much as we do EYA for the work they've done in the region, and be able to bring them to our hometown to work together on really a landmark project. So this is a really, really important milestone for APA, and we are really deeply committed to executing, you know, as Chris mentioned, on a very complex, aggressive timeline project. But really, this is our sweet spot, which is infill construction in Arlington. I'm joined tonight by Mike Chiappa. Mike, if you want to wave, he's our Senior Vice President of Real Estate. He oversees both the real estate team. We have a 13-person real estate team, but he recently took over asset management because it's really important to me to know that we're not just worried about when we're building the building, but how we're operating the building in the long term. And, you know, Mike and I have worked together for 8 years, and we are, you know, bringing the same passion we're bringing to development now to ensuring that we are recapitalizing older properties. So you all just saw that we closed on the Arna Marbella scattered site renovation that we broke ground on at the end of the year. So it's Mike that is helping kind of make sure that that's all happening in the APA work plan. I'm also joined by Mitch Crispell, who's our director in the real estate team. Mike has 2 directors. You all may remember our good friend Charles Sims is the other director in the real estate team, a former housing commissioner. So Mitch and Charles divide up the entire real estate portfolio. And Haley Norris, who you know from the Housing Commission, is actually going to be our senior project manager on this development. So hopefully that, you know, helps you figure out a little bit of how APA works. If you want to go to the next slide, Mitch. But some stats. APA today is 2,600 homes. Over 4,000 people call APA home tonight. We have 400 units under construction, including 144 units at Ballston Station. That's the church partnership with Central United Methodist Church. That's going to have a 90-unit daycare center in it across the street from the Metro. We should, you know, that's not one of the projects we're highlighting, but that is one that we're really excited to be delivering in the county. We also have 1,500 units in the pipeline getting ready to close throughout the DMV. Our focus in our niche is 30 to 60% of the area median income. That, and in addition to that, wanting to set aside around 10% of our units to do partnerships with permanent supportive housing partners. It's groups like Doorways for Women and Children that you know well. ASPAN, which was rebranded to, I'm forgetting the name now, Pathways. And so we have MOUs with nonprofit partners throughout the county so that we are the landlord, but they identify them, they provide services, and we work together to make sure that they have housing within the APA portfolio. But we're more than just developers. You know, at our core, what APA is yes, we're very proud of the beautiful buildings that we build, but it's more important to me what happens in the buildings after they're placed in service. And we have a 16-person resident services team led by Marquand Jackson, who we recruited in the middle of COVID to move here from Detroit, actually from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, where he was teaching the School of Social Work, to come here and design both programs that can offer housing stability as well as opportunity for APA residents. Out of the 4,000 people that call APA home, half of them are under the age of 25. So a lot of our focus is around next generation activation and after school tutoring and addressing learning loss and mental health support and food insecurity. Marquand and his 16-person team, we have one full-time person at every APA property that has over 100 units. Now in a campus like Crystal Houses, that's going to look even better. And when I think of the Arlington Community High School that's being built on the Amazon campus and the opportunities that can offer residents like ours, APA doesn't have a property in Crystal City. With this, we will be able to be more connected to that community, get not only the residents that are part of the Crystal House community integrated into all the things that Crystal City has to offer, but we could bring folks that live throughout the Columbia Pike or along the RB corridor to get to Crystal City through some of these programs. I'm going to turn it over. Oh, and the last point I should make, the Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing is a little bit of a misnomer because we are now serving, as of 2017, 5 jurisdictions, including Montgomery County, Fairfax, Loudoun. And thanks to EYA, the DC, they selected us to be their partner in our first DC deal that breaks ground next month. It's a 90-unit senior housing deal, affordable, that we are really excited about. But I'm going to let Mitch take you through the rest of the slides, but we are really excited to be here tonight.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to highlight 2 of our recent projects and then give a little bit of an overview of the site, and then we'll take your questions. So you guys probably already know about these projects, but we're really proud of Terwilliger Place that we opened last year. 160 units with half of them a preference for veterans, right at the Virginia Square Metro. Beautiful building, beautiful interiors. We're really happy with how that turned out. It came to us from the American Legion Post, and they've got a 6,000 square foot space on the ground floor now that they can use, a brand new facility, much better than the place they had before. So it's just a win-win for both of us. Queens Court in Roslyn, you guys probably remember the old building, the small 39-unit garden complex that we've redeveloped into our highest density project. I think this is probably the best comp for what the Crystal House developments are going to look like. Pretty high density, right near a metro station, infill development like Jack was mentioning. And we opened this, almost 2 years ago now. And we also developed a public park as part of this. You probably know about it already right here. And I think that also is a good comp for what we're going to do at Crystal House, because there's 2 parks required as part of the site plan that APA and EYA are going to develop. And so we have experience working with the county on building, those public amenities. So we're going quick through those because we know you guys know us. Okay, so here's the last slide, and this is really just outlining kind of what is planned for the Crystal House development. And I'll just start by disclaiming that there's a lot still to be worked out in terms of the phasing and the details of each building. But we wanted to just come at this early stage and give you a high-level overview of what to expect there. And I'm sure we'll be back to give you more details as they develop. So I think Chris already mentioned this. There's the 2 existing buildings here, Crystal Houses 1 and 2. And then there's going to be 5 new buildings. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. These will have a mix of rental and for sale. The big buildings here will be mostly rental, and then over here is where we're thinking about potentially doing for sale. It'll also be a mix of family and senior projects. So we're penciling for now, at least one of the buildings will be dedicated to seniors. And then overall, the Amazon agreement and the LDDA call for about 844 units across the entire site of new density that we're adding. Of those, at least 655 will be affordable at a range from 30% to 80% AMI. It's about half at 60, a quarter at 50, and then about 10% at 80 and 10% at 30. So it's just the rough numbers. And there's an exhibit to the LDDA that we signed in December that we'll send you after the meeting that kind of gives this high level overview so you don't have to worry about the numbers right now. But we'll send that out. And we're still figuring out which, what mixes in each building and working through some planning processes, but that's the high level of the units and the income mix. Another key part of this development is providing replacement parking for the existing residents. So all this land right now is basically parking lots that the folks who live at Crystal Houses 1 and 2 are using for parking. So part of the agreement with Amazon, who assigned the option, was that all of those parking spaces had to be replaced in garages of the new buildings. So that's something that we'll be providing underground parking in these new buildings will be both for the residents of the new buildings and the residents of the existing buildings. And we'll make sure that they have parking during construction as well. We'll probably off-site, we're figuring that out as well. So we'll deliver these 5 new buildings and all these units in phases, and that's another thing that's still up in the air, but all of it is called to be completed by January 1st of 2028. So it'll be about 5 years to get it all done. And we've outlined in the LDDA exhibit that we'll send you outlines the expected future AHIF requests that we think will be required for each of the affordable buildings. Some of it, as Jack mentioned from precedent, some of it will be offset with land value from the EYA market rate component, so that's a win. But there will be a need for AHIF, and I think the reason for that is that, as you all know, unfortunately, getting the land donated is just not enough to make these deals work. There's still a need for subsidy if we're going to hit all those affordability targets we just mentioned. So that's why there will be a need for AHIF, and the approximate ballpark amounts are outlined in that exhibit, and we'll share that with you. All right, so that's our grand plan, 850 units in 5 years. Get excited, and I think we can take some questions now.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Did have a question. So I believe this is true. The 2 existing buildings, those are going to be rehabbed, or what's happening with those versus just the new 5 buildings?
So the 2 existing buildings will remain in WHC ownership. My understanding and our understanding from conversations with JBG and WHC is that they're roughly 65%, don't quote me, have already been, of the units in the existing buildings have already been rehabbed to some degree, that there's roughly 20 million plus or minus in investment that's going into the existing buildings. But really that's their bailiwick, and they're working to bring down their rent, buy down their rents and do what they're doing. But they're obviously going to be a partner in this development with a number of all these complexities that we've talked about, future reasonable agreements, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously they're going to be a partner with this.
Okay, and so when we're talking about the 850 units total, does that only include the 5 new buildings and those units, or does that also include the existing 2 buildings?
So that's just the new infill development, the new development. The existing units, which I mentioned at the beginning, is roughly 828. So you're looking at across the whole site 1,600 plus units.
And do any of the existing 2 buildings, do those have affordable units in them, or those are all market rate, and the plan is to keep those market rate?
So yeah, essentially when WHC acquired this, they self-imposed a self-enforcing affordability covenant to take what were market rents and over the course of 5 years buy those down to affordable rents, primarily at around 80% AMI, but about roughly 25% will be 50% or below of the existing. So we're talking about CH1 and 2, right? That's not really part of this what we're presenting here, but yeah, as a way of background.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that clarification.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question about the home ownership units. Are they going to be market rate or affordable units? Or is that too?
Yeah, so it's a great question. We're not there yet. They would be predominantly market rate. And again, as Mitch was saying, we do need to create as much value in the land as we can to help to subsidize all of that replacement parking as well as the rent. So I could imagine there's a component of affordable home ownership. We just haven't kind of updated, where we need to be in terms of that. But yeah, I can imagine a component, but substantially market rate.
I have a kind of process question. I think, Chris, you're probably the one to answer it. So what I was hearing from Mitchell, I think, was that, the idea right now is we might be, it's not locked in, obviously, but we're thinking approximately 10% of the units that are affordable at 80%, about 50%, I think is what I heard, is 60, about 25 at 50, about 10 at 30%. I think those are the ballparks we're looking at. So, in a normal development situation, right? Like APA comes, they got the property, they're coming to us for an AHIP request, whatever. This is different because there's been this assignment that the county got, and the county had this, obviously, this competition and selected the development partners. So, like, from a process standpoint, like, how much discretion do EYA and APA have over things like income mix versus the county saying we would prefer this versus this? Because, in a regular situation, APA would say, well, this is what we're proposing because this is what makes sense, and and then you work it out. But this is different. The county has selected EYA and APA on behalf of the county's interest here. So can you walk us through how that's going to work?
Sure. So I think Mitch referenced sort of a set of we talked about them in the DDA as sort of a set of minimum sort of affordability that's based on our affordable housing master plan and all the goals that we have. And so obviously things change. Obviously QAPs change, as you all know. We'll have a new QAP in another year. The incentives could change, and things move to how incentives change, right, for raising tax credit equity. So we have to allow some understandably some flexibility as projects come down by phase. But at this point, we do have a fairly rich development program that is very beneficial from the affordable housing perspective, where we try to check as many boxes as we can, knowing that at a level of complexity like this and phasing over time, things are going to change, and we recognize that, right? So we'd be working with them at each phase and how that would stack up versus the overall development.
Yeah, so like if I can just follow up with a comment, I mean,
sure.
I'm the first person to say this. I know I won't be the last, but the county has had a lot of success with the 60% AMI units. That's like the model. As I've understood it, becoming an amateur, learning this stuff, the 60% AMI units are typically going to get built. But as we build more of them, a lot of the folks in those units, of course, and I say of course, but a lot of them still are getting housing grants or other systems from the county or maybe some federal dollars. I think a lot of folks would be interested in us trying to maybe get away from that, hardwiring some lower income restricted units. I understand that has to make sense from a financial perspective, and so I would just urge us to really start thinking now as far as like how can we get more, not just 50%, but maybe 40 or 30. And I understand there's trade-offs, so I don't have a number in mind, but just really trying to hardwire more than 10% of the units. Obviously Arlington Community Foundation's been leading on this, looking at Barcroft, but I think here especially we got a transit-rich area, job-rich area. I'd like to see us lean into more than just the 10% if we can. That's my comment. Thanks.
That's a great comment, and I think that your point is well taken. But just so you know, we are thinking about this, and by way of reference, the number that are proposed at 30% now roughly doubles the 30% stock that the county has right now. Just so you have a sense, so looking pretty good out the gate. So I'll just say that in response.
Just two quick questions. Could you pull up page 29 real quick?
Of the presentation?
Yeah, would that be all right? On the top part of the property where the home ownership option would be available, I noticed that the buildings were split. I just wonder, was that like a structural reason, or is there anything stopping you from just making one long building there? Would that give us more units? Or I was just wondering what the...
Yeah, we're studying that. Yes, we're looking into it.
Okay,
perfect. But it's the approved plan. That was a very
Gotcha.
critical component from the 4.1 approval.
Okay,
So we're kind
cool.
of inheriting what they did there, and I think a mid-block path was like.
Part of the, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
The second question, and pardon me, I had to step away, but I did want to acknowledge, just I appreciate the focus on childcare. What about like high-speed internet? Has that been part of the thinking across the campus once it's all built out?
Yeah, well, APA has made a commitment to provide free high-speed internet to all of our residents across our portfolio for our new projects. So yes, that will be a part of this.
Perfect, thanks so much.
Possibilities. Can I just make a comment? This is not for, this is like for us, not really folks on the call, but I'm just thinking about this, and this is just kind of the way my brain works, but like, I'm listening to EYA's presentation, and it makes perfect sense with the market as we have it. There's these like pretty expensive market rate properties, and we're getting value from that. We're doing, this is what we talked about in affordable housing. And it's just like another kind of aha for me of like, oh, this is why it's important we pursue maybe like land use and other things. We've got this middle, well, you know, use the other word for it, but we have this policy gap that's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because in order to get the units on a lower income scale, we've got to just keep pushing up the value of these units up here. And so it's like, it's great, but it's also like creating a separate problem we need to solve. So it has nothing to do with this. It's just kind of another aha for me. That's it.
Thanks, Eric. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Okay. Oh, it looks like we have a hand up by.
That might be Doris.
Go ahead, Doris.
You call on me? This is
Yes.
Doris. Yeah, okay, just making sure. What I wanted to ask is the partners in this partnership. I'm wondering, I am a member of the Arlington County Disability Advisory Commission and am a liaison to the Housing Commission, and I'm wondering what your philosophy is and implementation, expected implementation, to maximize the availability of both affordable as well as market rate units in these developments for people with disabilities who are in need of fully accessible type A units, partly because the Affordable Housing Master Plan has a target that 10% of all CAF units by 2040 are expected. The expected outcome is that 10% will be fully accessible, and also Crystal City and Pentagon City being part of a very important transit corridor for people with disabilities who need accessible transportation is very, very important. So I'm just wondering what ideas you might have for maximizing. The building code only requires 2% of the total number of units in a building, for example, but that's a floor, not a ceiling. So it would be very incredibly it would be a model for the nation if you would figure out maximizing that number that you can get beyond that 2%.
And Doris, we will just, we've worked together in the past, so, we will work with EYA to ensure that we talk about our philosophy, but in the past, we've always exceeded the minimum floors of the 2% and tried to strive for, in some of our deals are 9% deals around the 10% mark we've been able to hit. These are a lot of units, and I know we have some senior buildings, and typically in the senior buildings, we make those 100% universal design. So I will get back to you with details, and we will certainly talk to EYA and work through that and circle back, and certainly things like roll-in showers and other best practices that we've learned from working with you and the commission, we will make sure that we incorporate into the program here.
And I can just add that the floor for, in terms of the requirement under our development agreement is 5% of all the affordable units being fully accessible and 18% employing universal design.
Okay, thank you, Doris. Any other questions or comments?
It's exciting. It's really exciting. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
I did have
Thank
just
you.
a process question, as far as when this is likely to come back before the commission for action. Do we have a sense of?
So it would be for the first AF request, which I'm not sure when that will be, but I'm not sure. Chris, do you know when?
We're still determining, but it's probably sometime this year. We're hoping. So stay tuned. Got a lot to do.
And so for this project, there's no like SPRC.
So there is no SPRC. It did go through a site plan process in 2019.
Okay.
And that's the site plan that they're working with currently. And I don't know the project as well as Chris, so I don't want to speak to it, but there probably are some small tweaks to that site plan that will be proposed going forward.
Okay. Thank you. So next up on our agenda, we have the Housing Commission 2023 work plan. And this is for action. And so this work plan is sort of tweaking of the plan that we had approved last year, and incorporating the feedback that commissioners had made at our December meeting about things that we would like to focus on. And I can briefly sort of highlight how I'd incorporated those in here. So the first item, the oversight of affordable housing properties and reviewing programs and policies to support affordable housing residents. That has stayed the same, but just updated the language to account for what we had accomplished last year. And then the first bullet, following up with staff and the county board on the implementation status of the JSAC report, which we talked about during public comment today. And then following up with staff on the implementation status of the long-term strategies document as well. And the other bullets, I think, are largely the same as last year. So continuing to promote tenant empowerment, looking at, so this one was new, examining strategies to advance economic mobility, promote pathways out of subsidized housing for low-income residents. So that was based off of feedback from last meeting. And then continue working with the Tenant Landlord Commission, other advocates to identify best practice and policy solutions. Any questions or comments about A? Okay. So for B, maintaining and strengthening role as chief advisor to County Board of Housing Issues. So this largely remained consistent with last year, but with the addition of the first bullet, collaborating with staff to develop an equity framework for the commission and enhance the data presented to the commission to clearly show the impact on and consultation with historically disadvantaged communities. So this was also based on the feedback last meeting, and sort of taking into account some of the discussions where staff, when they brought projects to us, have talked about, well, we considered equity, and we've asked, well, can you tell us more about that? And we said, well, we don't really have anything to share beyond the fact that we've considered equity. So to this end too, I'm meeting with Samia, what is her official title?
Chief Briefs and Equity Officer.
Yes, tomorrow to kind of talk through what this might look like. Working with staff, I've also given a heads up to Ann Venecia that this is something I'd like to work with her and staff on figuring out what data currently exists that can be presented to the commission on a regular basis when we get site plans and other projects coming before us, and just how we can make progress with this goal both in the short term and the long term. The rest of the items on here are pretty consistent with what was in here in the past and just continuing on with those. Any questions around or comments on B?
I just want to, I guess, lift up what you were saying with equity, and I like where you're going. You talked about like what data is possible, but I think as a commission, we should say anything that comes before us should come with that accompanied equity discussion. So instead of, like what's possible, if anything's coming before this commission, it should also come with that supplemental data. That would be mine.
That is my hope, whether that's like an equity addendum that gets, tacked on to like what typically gets presented to us, or in some other capacity, it's really calling out like, what is the impact of this project on members of the disability community or impact of, minority populations in the neighborhood or what have you, and also looking at consultation and highlighting not just like, oh, we engage with the community, but how did you engage with renters? How did you engage with, Black and brown residents, and making sure that we're reinforcing for the county that this is really important to us, and making sure that that's part of the public discussion as well.
Oh, I have something.
Yes.
It was really, I watched because because I presented back in December. So the transfer of development rights proposal, which was approved by the county board, we heard, right? We had some discussion. Holly and some other folks had raised some concerns about that, and then I went to the county board and listened to them. And they also raised some concerns that I kind of honestly was a little bit surprised about. Several of the board members seem to be a little bit concerned about how the ordinance is working nowadays, as far as our developers really almost always exclusively choosing the ability to contribute to AHIF versus on-site units. I say I'm surprised because I'd heard in the past from certain folks that they were kind of okay with that because the money was great too and we could maximize it and so on and so forth. And maybe there's a shift and maybe there's not. Maybe it was just a meeting and that's what people said. But I kind of sort of would like us to consider revisiting that, and maybe the ask is to get Matt to come to one of our meetings. We can talk about it. Something like that would be a pretty massive undertaking, and it would need to go on the CPHD work plan if it were ever to be contemplated. But I was just really, several of them said this, and I was like, ooh, antennas going up, because I'd always heard we're okay with the contributions. We'll do some on site for bonus density, but contributions are okay generally because of our robust development program. Now that APA is expanding to other jurisdictions, it's harder to do development in Arlington. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's time to revisit that conversation.
It's been 10 years, right? At least 10 years.
15, 20.
So you're not just talking about the transfer of development rights, but
So
you're
now,
talking about,
so that was my jumping off point. I guess what I'm saying is you play with the language, but essentially, revisit. You could just say revisit with our county board liaison. If the county board is even considering, re-examination of the ordinance and its structure. It's not in the work plan that I'm aware of. And so this is like just the tiniest beginning of a conversation.
I know last year there was talk of revisiting it, and a decision was made in the county and among some advocacy groups that was not the right time to do that.
Sure.
And I think in part that could be the makeup of the General Assembly and
Sure.
Politics
Oh, yeah.
in the governor's office.
And that was notwithstanding, that's a pretty major hurdle. I mean, I remember Arlington Community Foundation tried to look at this a couple of years ago and basically ran into a dead end, as I recall. And I would have a lot of concerns. But look, there were like 3 county board members saying it, and I was like, wow, okay. It kind of came up in that discussion because a lot of folks were concerned about the lack of on-site units in that proposal in Ballston.
So how long would it take to change something like that?
I have no idea, and I'm not looking at the conversation right now. I'm just saying I was kind of surprised that there was so much interest in really maybe looking at that potentially. It was like a formal directive. It was just they're kind of going back and forth. So hey, if our electeds are saying it, maybe I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
I have no idea.
happy to add it to the work plan as
Sure.
something that we can look into for this year.
And maybe it's a conversation with Matt offline. Hey, you know, where's the mood right now? And maybe it's something we wait 3 years.
Yeah, my guess is, my understanding from talking to board members is that as far as legislative priorities for the General Assembly, it's all defense and not really, offense at this point. Yeah, so, and anything that tweaks how Arlington does things, they kind of want to stay away from because they don't want, to
I
open up a
understand.
can of worms.
I'm just pushing, we're an institution too, and like, it's always good for us to keep pushing, even if we're almost 100% certain the answer is going to be no.
Mhm.
Them having to keep hearing the ask is not always a bad thing.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to add it.
There's no market adjustment or inflation in that as well, right? Like the rate that was negotiated 10, 15 years ago is the same amount that developers contribute today. Is that right?
The rate goes up with CPI change each year.
Okay.
And I say this with, I don't know where I would land on it, but it's a conversation.
Yeah, I mean,
It comes up every site plan that comes through, so I think
Yeah.
even if it's not going outside of the county for now.
yeah, definitely we can add it and we can have that conversation, see where it goes. I'm cool with that.
Can I add one more thing?
Yes.
Not related to the ordinance at all?
Yep.
So like, when I was chair, but even before I was chair, it feels like every time the budget comes up, it's like, oh crap, the budget's here. Like trying to get ahead of it. And part of it is like the timing, I'm not throwing shade, but like part of it is just the timing of like when the manager releases like the first draft and then things come out. And like my recollection is that usually hits the streets like the end of January or whatever. And then it's kind of like a scramble for like a lot of the advisory groups and so forth. So this is not well thought out, but I'm looking at the calendar now and thinking, is there any way that we can kind of sort of try to get ahead of that like a little bit? Because what we've heard, at least publicly, is that I think the manager has said, the board has said like that AHEF likely will be proposed to be flat, which I think is like 17 or something $million. And it's not all AHEF, but that's the big item. So I don't know. Do we want to try to get ahead of that? I don't know if we can, but it always feels like a rush when it comes out.
I agree. You're talking about like potentially moving that up to February.
I don't know. We need the budget. Like we need something to react to.
Yeah, and when is the manager releasing the budget to the public? I think that's February, right? Or is it the end of January?
I don't know. I think like because there's those budget hearings and the chairs go, so like you should get invited, and then but like I remember like all 3 years it was like it got released and then the meeting was like the next week, but we hadn't had a meeting, so it was kind of this dance of like what do people want.
I think usually the work sessions are like early March.
Yeah, so it's I don't know. So there you go. That's your mess. You can.
No, I agree with you. I mean, and I definitely want to make sure that we, consider robust budget recommendations. I don't know how fruitful it's going to be this year. I felt like last year we were largely ignored, as were the housing advocates, by the board and the manager. And I know one of the key things that we had asked for was additional staff capacity, and we were basically told by the board there's no issues with staff capacity, which is the opposite of what staff constantly tell us. So there's a big disconnect there that no one seems to want to acknowledge. So we can see from my brief conversation with Matt, it didn't sound like he was confident that there were the votes to add additional staff to CPHD to address some of the issues on the board. So we can always push for it, and I think we should, but I'm not super optimistic at this point.
I want to second what Eric said, because I think it is going to be a very complex process. So like, I don't think that we'd even be able to get, even if we had a magic wand, all the way through it this year, but at least if we do some foundational work this year, perhaps that sets us up next year to be able to maybe move the ball a little bit further.
Well, or like, I mean, what we could do is like, I don't know if we'll have that budget by the next meeting or not. And if we don't, like, we could at least say like, let's go around the table, like, what are priorities for people? And if that's like an informal understanding, or we don't think, I don't know if we take a vote on that, but we could talk, because it's not just AHIP, right? You're talking about staff, housing grants, it's a big budget. And so maybe that's one approach. So at least if you're going into like a work session or something, you got something.
Yeah. I think that the big concern for me is just if missing middle is going to be February, then, there's not much.
Meeting then. Hopefully we don't have to do it, Daniel, the planning commission and.
But yeah, so there's some big items hovering over our heads on the schedule that depending when they drop, it's just going to be tough to find time for anything else. But I think the point is well taken. And we can move discussion of the FY 2024 budget up to February. But I don't know. It will depend on when missing middle hits.
Whatever you think makes sense.
Any other thoughts on that from members of the commission?
Sorry, just from my understanding, when there was like 2 dates, like for example, discussion of 2022 Housing Commission annual report, February, the review and approval of the annual report. Does that mean there's 2 meetings or 1, or what does that mean?
That would be during the same meeting. And I think a lot of these, like I basically just changed the years from what was on here the previous year. There's some things that I added or changed around, I think, but yeah. And I think,
So is there not a possibility of splitting some of these meetings?
What do you mean? Like having 2 meetings instead of 1 meeting? Or
Yes. Because it is 8:42 and we have still, more information. And if we're gonna, really talk about these things, all coming from work, et cetera, to really kind of have fresh minds for some of these discussions. I don't know how anyone feels about it, but the beginning of the meeting was very important. I want to make sure the focus is on these things as well. That's my thing, my 2 meetings, where we know we've gone into where it's 11 o'clock at night, and I don't know about you, but I don't think I'm functioning past 9:30.
I think we can certainly discuss that. One of the things that I plan to do is schedule one-on-one meetings with each of the commissioners to, talk over how things are going, get to know people better, learn names. And that's something that I'm happy to bring up too. Do you prefer long meetings, or do you prefer, that we split some things up into 2 meetings a month? I know it's tough because a lot of people, they basically sign up for 1 meeting a month. And splitting it into 2 could be challenging for some people, but I think it's certainly worth the discussion if people would prefer to do that versus, having a very lengthy meetings at times.
Colin, can I just say one more thing?
Yes.
I think, after having watched a little bit of both those planning commission meetings, I think it would probably be very prudent of us to maybe schedule 2 sessions for that topic, or at least have it on because we have to have public notice, right, for our meetings. And I do not want 2 meetings, but I mean, is it hard for anybody to imagine we might get 80, 70 speakers, something crazy? I just think we should strongly consider having like a second session on the books. I don't know. Talk to Alex. So
the last one was 65 speakers.
Yeah. So even if you limit the speaker to 2 minutes, can you hear me? Can you? I don't know.
This is just for the.
Yeah, I'm just talking about missing middle.
He's talking about missing middle.
Yeah, sorry,
I
I'm just talking about missing middle.
Sarah's talking about more broadly for meetings that we think could go longer.
Are you, if there are decided on 2, are you still thinking on Thursday? Because I'm on another commission, so I have to.
Oh, I'm on this one. I'm on HOA thing.
Okay.
I have just my personal stuff,
Yeah.
but I want to be able to focus on these where it is not going into, I'm talking and I'm going to be going in, but because we have been there where it's been 11 o'clock at night and they're very important meetings. But me personally, I don't know if starting my day at 7:30 in the morning and then 11 o'clock. So, no. And especially the missing middle, which I think is very important. Yeah, sometimes it has to happen, you know? And we have people coming, like, people from Serrano, they come to us looking for help. And so I think we have a duty to kind of be more focused for some of these topics.
Is there a way to have like 2 meetings, one that's action items and one's informational?
Yeah.
Or does that just draw this whole thing out too much?
I mean, I think we have the flexibility to add meetings as we, think we need. It's just a question of making sure that that works for the whole commission and that, people are on board with that. I think one of the other things that we can look at is like for Missing Middle, that's probably a good virtual meeting to have. A little bit easier to have longer meetings with lots of speakers.
We have one person who agrees.
For virtual versus in person. So we do have that flexibility with those 2 meetings that we can do virtual. So I think that's
Could they start
probably a
earlier?
good
I mean, or
candidate.
we cannot start earlier. It's all been published.
I think we can't start before 7.
I mean, this was my opinion. This was one of the very hardest part. I mean, Collins has been a chair before. I think this is one of the hardest parts about being chair is figuring out the meeting cadence and how much you can fit in one meeting and subcommittees and all that. It's just really hard. And when I was chair, we had a couple of meetings that were like pretty bloated, and there was really not a whole lot I could do about it. And so you just try to move things along and you do the best you can. And sometimes these meetings go on, right? Because Serrano, and you gotta dedicate 3.5 hours, right? And then sometimes you're like, let's go, guys, it's fine. That's kind of how I feel right now a little bit. But so I trust Colin. I think Colin will talk to Alex and staff and figure out something that makes sense.
Can I say? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just want. How much more do we have? Like, if you can guesstimate.
As far as time,
Yeah. Well, the material. Like, I'm thinking another 30 minutes.
how much time would development updates take?
There's not very much for development updates or subcommittee. I
think it's just homeownership, right?
Homeownership.
No, we are meeting in February, so.
So both of those are
We're
like
ready.
5.
Okay, so this is,
So we're about to wrap up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just say, sorry, now that we've gone down this road, I would not be a big fan of 2 meetings generally, like month to month. I would just say, except for anomalies that might bring out 6, that is different. Or like Serrano, like that's a different situation.
Yeah.
That's all. I won't belabor
Okay.
that, but
No,
I think
it's helpful feedback.
you can think of the time that you put on your calendar, so it's not always beneficial to put on there.
Okay. So I didn't sound like people had additional comments or questions on part B. And then we started talking about part C, which is policy. And this is where we really added in all of the items that people had brought up last meeting. So obviously Missing Middle, Glen Lakes and Boulevard, then the redevelopment of Barcroft, as well as efforts to reduce displacement of existing residents, the home ownership study, comprehensive review of housing grants, which I'd like to get more information about, like what the timeline is for those recommendations this year. But then looking at the fair housing, which I know we've been talking about forever, but that plan should be dropping any day, and that will also be a big giant report that's like 100 and some odd pages long that people, or maybe 1,000. Sorry, I think it's closer to 1,000, not 100. And that will have a lot of great things for us to talk about within this commission, and it's hopefully going to be briefed to us at some point. But they're still waiting on the translation of the final, and that's why it keeps being delayed. And then looking at eviction efforts, we've added in the affordable housing ordinance, revisiting that, re-examining the transfer of development rights, strategies to convert commercial property into residential property. I've talked to Alex about having a presentation or briefing from the county on existing efforts to incentivize that, make that easier within the county. And then looking at NOFA, again, efforts to streamline, reduce bureaucratic burden on affordable housing development efforts, and then field trips, which I don't know a lot about, but it seems to be, it was on the work plan last year, and I'm happy to look into seeing if we can do a field trip this year, which I think is just touring one of the affordable housing properties that was recently completed. Is that typically what the field trip consisted of?
I mean, I'm looking around and think I'm the most tenured person at the table, and it still existed a little bit when I joined, and then obviously died during the pandemic. So yeah, I mean, I don't feel that strongly about it, but like, Napa just opened a property recently, so that
Or we
would
could
be
piggyback on another field trip, because doesn't the CDBG
Yeah,
have an annual?
there is like an annual kind of round robin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's affordable housing.
Right, a bus.
Right.
or something.
Yeah, exactly. They go to like 4 or 5 sites or something.
Does a field trip count as a meeting if we're all together?
So I do think if we're all gonna be together, there will be quorum. Like, yeah, but.
The people going, no, okay.
Oh, I do have a question.
So we might have to do public notice for it, but I think if we post a public notice, I think that should satisfy it.
I'm not asking whether we could do it. I'm asking if it were possible. But like, if we went to some place like the new American Legion, like, is there a space where we could host a meeting?
Yeah, cool. Just community
So
rooms
is
at
that a
all.
possibility? I mean, we'd have to give public notice, but is that possible? If we decided, hey, we want to do a tour and then the meeting or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay, we should do that.
That's a field trip.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah,
Just get there early,
happy to
like,
look into
Exactly.
that.
Yeah, get there early to tour and then have the public.
Is there anything that's missing or that people want changed from the list of policy items on here? Okay, hearing none, and then the last one is collaboration. So this is also, consistent with last year. I think I added the Human Rights Commission, especially around fair housing. That's a relationship that I'd like to work on this year as well. Strengthening that along with the Planning Commission, the Tenant Landlord Commission, that I think the Housing Commission has made a lot of strides in developing those relationships and working together where possible. And then working with our counterparts in other jurisdictions. So in Alexandria, Eric has already put me in touch with the chair of their Affordable Housing Advisory Commission. And so I hope to be meeting with their chair later this month, and then having a conversation, or potentially doing a joint commission meeting at some point this year if we can figure out the logistics and what that agenda would look like. I'd done something similar when I chaired the Tenant Landlord Commission with the Alexandria Landlord Tenant Relations Board. So I think that's helpful because there's a lot of issues that impact both us. I know they're very keenly interested in what happens with missing middle and zoning changes within Arlington as they look at potentially similar things for Alexandria, and then members of the public school community as well. Any comments or questions on collaboration? Okay. Anticipated schedule. So I did have a question actually for Eric, and I meant to point this out when I sent you the draft.
Yep.
The annual report. Who typically develops that?
Oh, I did, but I can work with you on it.
Okay.
Yeah. And you'll probably start to get emails from Ken. I think it was Kendra or one of the folks, like one of the staff folks for the county board. Usually we'll send an email like, send me your report. Like, okay, I gotta work on that. So that should be pretty soon. Unrelated reminder, because I'm thinking of the county board, everybody has to do their ethics things by the end of the month.
Is it the finance disclosure?
Yeah, financial
thing?
disclosure. I think that's the end of the month. You should
Yeah.
have already gotten it.
I got the email.
Yes, electronic.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just popped in my head. And then Colin, for the representation, because I suspect maybe that'd be your next question.
Yep.
I mean, I don't think you have to worry about January. We don't have an action item here. And then, you just, if folks can follow, I always try to get folks to volunteer. And then, some months we need folks, and sometimes we need 2 folks, and a lot of months we don't need anybody, because it just depends, so.
I like that you sent around like the sign up genius last year.
Yeah.
Just FYI, I thought that was helpful because then it pops up a reminder for the day you signed up for.
Okay.
So no, a person doesn't do that.
Yeah, Eric, I can figure out what you did last year.
I just did I just went to the county board meetings. I did all the Saturdays.
Yeah.
I had primaries secondary, you could sign up.
Okay.
And then at every housing commission meeting, I tried to be like, we do need you, or we don't need you, and just kind of figured it out, you know?
Okay.
But then it sends a reminder like a certain number of days before, so you get it in your email.
So you kind of, it's some massaging, but just having somebody in place helps. Yeah.
Just a quick note.
Yes.
VHDA is no longer VHDA, it's Virginia Housing
Where is
That's
that
on page
listed?
3.
on page 3.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, on that, just to make it like the most useful
Second-
conversation. Yeah,
Second from the bottom.
HTA and MyTech applications.
Oh, okay, yep.
But they usually post like the new QAP and manual like December, January.
Okay.
So I guess, not that you couldn't talk through it later, but if it were to be a little bit more like, kind of when it got released, that might be a better early in the year plan going forward.
Okay.
Unless they do another big QAP, but that's when they usually will like post everything that's changed in early January.
Okay.
Not suggesting we add it to February.
Yeah. Yeah, we can.
Sounds like it's gonna be boring.
We can figure that out. I also did want to do a review of the charter. I had a couple changes, might be controversial. I think we should officially change our name to Housing Commission instead of the lengthy name that no one uses for our commission, but we can get into that later. But okay, so are there any other questions or comments about anything on this? I'll send out the Sign Up Genius so that we can have people volunteer for representation at county board meetings. There's a couple edits that were brought up, like changing Virginia housing, adding the affordable housing ordinance, like re-examination in here. But are people comfortable with approving it with the names going to be added later, as opposed to waiting to officially approve it next month?
I'll make the motion to approve it with those suggested changes.
Yeah, do I have a second? Okay. Then we can, I'll do a roll call for this one. Okay. So voting to approve this as amended, Commissioner Berkey?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Blake?
Yes.
Okay. And I also realize I have not introduced Commissioner Blake yet, who's new. So apologies for that. We'll do that after this. Commissioner Brown? I think absent. Commissioner Edwards is also absent, right?
Yeah.
Commissioner Heminger?
Yes.
Commissioner Lee, I think, was also absent. I vote yes. Commissioner McGilvray?
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Montgomery?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Norris?
Yes.
Commissioner Rubalcaba?
Yes.
And Commissioner Surface?
Yes.
Okay, great. That passes. Thank you very much. And yeah, so with that, belated introduction of Nikki Blake. If Commissioner Blake, you want to introduce yourself to the rest of the commission. And again, apologies for not doing this at the start of the meeting when I should have, but Commissioner Blake was appointed in December by the county board to join our commission.
Thanks. Yeah, really happy to be here. And apologies I couldn't join you all in person. I had a trip pre-planned, and I'm actually in Big Bend area in Texas. So just glad it worked out with the signal and everything. But yeah, just really glad to be here and looking forward to working with you all. I just recently returned to Arlington. Well, not recently, about 2 years ago now. I moved here after grad school. And so just glad to be back and looking forward to being more involved.
Great. We're happy to have you, Nikki. And so next item on the agenda, we have the development updates.
Yeah, so a couple very quick updates tonight. First on Queens Court, which was actually shown during the presentation earlier today. A couple bullets on that. So shortly before the new year, the county received about $1.5 million in construction cost savings for the Queens Court development. So as a reminder, Queens Court contains 249 affordable units in the Roslyn area and was approved for a total $16.7 million AHIP loan, or about $67,000 per unit. And the $1.5 million in cost savings will be applied towards the Queens Court AHIP loans. So that's good news story there. Crystal Plaza 5 as well. That's the one that the site plan that we heard back in November. It was delayed due to a public notice error, so you will see that on the county board agenda for this month. And then that is it for development updates other than what's on the sheet. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them or work with the project lead.
Thanks, Alex. Any questions on development updates? Okay. Last item on the agenda, then the subcommittee reports. And I know you said the next meeting's in February for the homeownership subcommittee.
And I should have that ready for you. It is it's February 17th. It's 8:30 in the morning. An hour and a half meeting.
Anything else you wanted to provide on that, or?
I don't know. We had our last meeting. It's just more information. It's all on the website. It's great information.
I think the next step is community engagement. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, great. Any other questions or comments on that?
And that's just for the home ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I don't think any of the other subcommittees have met since our last meeting, right?
No, there's nothing going on Plan Langston Boulevard. New that I'm aware of, right?
I haven't seen anything.
Yeah.
And then, but for the 2500 Wilson, I cannot make that meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I have another meeting that night.
Okay. It looks like Commissioner McGilvray is your backup.
Yeah.
I
mean, I plan to attend also the Langston. I just haven't heard anything since, when was it? Because they canceled.
November?
They kept on changing it in November. And then I haven't seen anything. That's what I was looking at.
You can put me as an alternate.
We'll be as a second alternate.
For which one?
Well, I put.
What's on Callan?
Okay. Yeah.
Because right.
If you need an alternate, I'm.
Yeah.
For which one?
2500.
Okay.
Marker.
Yeah, the Langston one, I haven't seen much about that.
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, Margaret, are you able to make the meeting on January 31st since you are listed as an alternate for the 2500?
Sweet.
Okay, great. And if that changes, just let us know. We have 2 other alternates.
Okay.
Sounds good. Okay, any other subcommittee reports before we wrap up?
And just you all saw that. I don't know if everybody saw that Andrew Schneider stepped down as CEO of Arlington Thrive. And Susan Cunningham, we know her. She's the interim CEO. So I thought that was neat to send a note to Andrew.
Sounds good. I was on the board when we hired Andrew for. Okay. Well, then I think our meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
9:05.